So I just wanted to share with you a little bit about celebration and the journey that I have with celebration and where I've come and where I've gone and where I want to go. One of the things that I was really struck by when I was reading about celebration in the Bible is that Jesus is always celebrating, always celebrating things. And when he describes the story of the prodigal son. And the prodigal son comes home after going away and abandoning his family. And when he comes home, the father says, "Fatten the calf, we're going to celebrate. My son has come home." And so there's all these moments of celebration in the Bible. And God even instructs his people, the Israelites, to celebrate and have these huge festivals, bigger than we're even used to, because celebration is such a huge part of his heart, and it's such a huge part of who he is. God invented fun. I tell that to my kids all the time, that he came up with fun, that those moments of full joy come from him. And as I was reading and just trying to understand, trying to define celebration, I was reading in John, and Jesus mentions, he says, "I tell you these things so that you will be full of joy, and that joy will be full." And I feel like that's what celebration is it's full joy at its fullest, and it causes you to celebrate, whether that's jumping or singing or having a party. Celebration is full joy. Since moving to the South, I've seen this in y'all I'm learning with SEC football, is that fullness of joy is captured in those moments as we're celebrating our team winning the championship game, or just winning, or just kicking that ball into the field goal. Clearly, I'm really good at this. I'm learning. Go Tigers. But one of the things that I think, the reason I make that comparison is I think that we have a hard time in the church translating that celebration and that fullness of joy into our moments with each other and our moments meeting with God. And I wanted to preface that by saying that's the image of celebration. Everyone knows, in every culture, we celebrate. In some cultures, we throw colors of dust at each other, like in India, and we celebrate our children's birthdays. We know how to celebrate. God created us to celebrate and to have these moments of full joy. And so when I was younger, I started to question why that wasn't coming into my church experience. You know, I grew up in a very, very conservative church in the foothills of Colorado, and there were just rules. You grew up and you knew, like, this is the way that you worship and this is the way that you don't. And a lot of times I think that my interactions with the Lord lacked that celebration because we were so structured. And so one of the things that I learned as I got older and I started meeting the Lord personally, and I started having these victories with him personally, is that my gut reaction was to rejoice. Like, my gut reaction, and I'm a very expressive person, so it looks a little bit more expressive than for others, but for me it was to jump, and it was to sing, and it was to dance. And just like all of those fans and all those football fans in the stadiums, jumping and shouting and going, "Whoa, this is amazing!" That's inside of us. And so I started asking the Lord, why isn't this coming out in me? Like, I'm meeting the Lord of the universe, the God who created the worlds with his words, and you're meeting face to face with me. And sometimes our reaction is to celebrate and to rejoice. And why do we stop that? And as I started to dig into that with my own life, and the Lord started to show me, it actually really came to a tipping point for me. I was in this small mountain town in Mexico, on the coast of Mexico, and I'm watching as these amazing Mexican villagers who love Jesus are worshiping, and they're dancing, and they're crying, and they're just meeting with the Lord, and they're not reserved at all. They're just meeting with him and celebrating his presence. And I looked around, and my first response was skepticism. And I just want to say that, like, I think that is one of the biggest thieves of celebration, is skepticism, is saying, is this real? Like, is this really okay? In that moment, as I started to be skeptical, Jesus spoke into my heart, and he said, "Who are you skeptical of? Are you skeptical of them? Or are you skeptical of me?" I had to lay down that skepticism. I had to choose to trust him in my expression, and I had to choose to trust him. And if that meant that I was going to shout, so be it. If that meant that I was going to dance, awesome. If that meant that I was going to cry and weep, okay, that's all part of that celebration. And when I finally gave that over to him, I never looked back. And my encounters with the Lord entering into celebration have been so much richer and so much fuller. And let me just tell y'all, we have things to celebrate. Just like the prodigal son, we all were lost, facing death, and we've come to know him in life. That is something to celebrate. That is something to dance about. That is something to shout about. So what's stopping us? Is it skepticism? Is it fear of coming face to face with a God who loves to celebrate? Do we have a wrong impression of who our God is? Whatever it is, if we want to celebrate fully, we have to come face to face with what's stopping us from being those fans in the church service, shouting and hollering for him, because he gave us to that. He gave us that ability to celebrate so we could meet him in it. The other piece of celebration is doing it corporately and celebrating when big things happen. And so our journey, my husband and my journey with that, started when we first had our son. So Jaden was born a little bit differently. His body was formed abnormally because of a rare genetic disease. And so Jay came into this world fighting. It was our first moment, I think, where what we saw with our eyes didn't line up with the promises that we believed God had for us, and our journey became one of how do we respond to this? And I think that this is where thankfulness and celebration come together, is that as you're walking it out, like as you're walking out your victory, being thankful enables you to celebrate. And so I think that's where they come together. Sometimes when we're walking through life and we're like in a storm, we forget to see and celebrate when the clouds break a little bit. And I think that there's a lot of healing that happens in celebrating those things. And I think that God wants us to celebrate in those times when the clouds break. Not necessarily when the storm rolls away. Those are worth celebrating, like those big come to Jesus moments. I just was saved. Celebrate those, but also celebrate the little moments. And so for Jay, the last 7 years of his life have been learning how to do that. For the first year and a half of his life, Jaden ate with a tube, with an NG tube, and we had a pump, and it would pump food into his belly, and we fought for every ounce. It was really, really hard watching our little man. He's such a fighter, but just struggling to grow and to thrive. And we were praying, of course, and we had promises that the Lord had given us. And one of the promises he gave us at that time was that he would be renewed by the transforming of his mind. Because for Jaden, there was no physical reason at this point, at a year and a half, that he wasn't eating, but he was just scared. He was dependent on the tube. And the only options the doctors had was to do a behavioral modification program. And we just knew it was not the right fit. And so, long story short, God gave us this promise about him being transformed by the renewing of his mind, and he sent us to Virginia. And we found this incredible program that's based out of Europe. The Lord just plopped it in our laps, and it was all about weaning children from the tube with hunger, which was very scary and very, not what the American health system would do. And we had a lot of doctors beg us not to do it. And we just had to step out in faith and know, okay, Lord, this is what you've given us. And you said you would transform him. You would renew his mind and transform him. And so we're ready. Let's do this. So we went to Virginia, and Jaden pulled out his tube and he never put it back in. And I still remember the day after he pulled out his tube, we went to Chipotle. And we're sitting at Chipotle with our little man. And mind you, you guys, we've been parents for a year and a half. And so Jay's gone to restaurants before. But we're sitting in the Chipotle booth. And Jaden reaches out and grabs his chicken quesadilla. And he takes a bite. And we were so excited. I can't even, it's just a quesadilla, but my kid chose to eat this quesadilla, and then he ate it and he swallowed it, and there was no tube. And it was like, here's this break in the clouds. Like, there's so many more things that Jaden needs to overcome to find full healing. But this in this moment is worth celebrating, and this in this moment is worth remembering. And so what Jaden will tell you, and all my kids will tell you, is that from that moment on, for the last 5 years, every December 11th, the kids and I and Tucker, we all go to Chipotle, and we sit down And we celebrate that moment. We celebrate that moment when the clouds broke, when God reached in and changed things, and we remember it. There are going to be seasons, you guys, when we have incredible breakthroughs, and there's things to celebrate all the time. And then there's going to be seasons where we're going to forget all the things that God's done, and we're going to forget to celebrate. But the things he's already done are still worth celebrating. Like Jaden being freed from the tube and being able to eat of his own volition is still worth celebrating 7 years later. My kids now, they don't remember Jaden eating with a tube, but every year they remember us celebrating how God freed him. And now their faith is being built, remembering what God's done and remembering that nothing is impossible for the Lord. And we celebrate it. Let's worship communally as families, as members of the same family of God as this house right here that we have together. Let's worship and let's celebrate together, and let's remember what God has done. Let's celebrate that we fed 1 million children last year and that God opened up the doors and did amazing things. And let's remember that always, no matter how many more children we celebrate. Let's remember that faith step and celebrate together. And let's tell the generation to come about that. And let's celebrate as a family. And you all as families have these moments of incredible breakthrough, incredible moments of meeting with the Lord. They're worth celebrating, and keep celebrating them. Make a journal of celebration so that your kids, as they get older, can add to it. And every month we're celebrating. Every day we're celebrating something that the Lord has done. I want to grow in this. I want to learn how to celebrate more and to be people who are known to celebrate and dance. May the world look at us and go, like, that's full joy. I want to know how to do that.